everyone. Coach Susan and I are live with you to talk about a very important topic. And that topic is, do you have a hard heart or a guarded heart? Let me just click to go live on Instagram for just a minute so we can all start at the same time. Hey, everyone on Instagram. Welcome.
Hi.
Coach Susan.
I don't see anyone on Facebook. Oh, there we've got Karen. At least Karen is here with us.
Hi, and we've got 1, 2 on Instagram so far. Hi, welcome.
Awesome.
Coach Susan and I are here, and we're going to talk about this really important topic. How many of you have been accused of having a hard heart? Susan and I were talking about this earlier, and she said she was accused of having a hard heart when she thought she just had a guarded heart. And so it was important for us to talk with you about the difference, because God tells us in Proverbs, guard your heart above all else, because it is the wellspring of your life. And biblically, the heart refers to your essence, your spirit, your self, who you are, who God made you to be. Guard your heart above all else. We haven't heard that in Christian teaching, really. We've heard save your marriage above all else. But that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says, guard your heart above all else, for it is the wellspring of your life. What does that really look like and sound like and look like in a real life situation? So we're going to talk about that, because the Bible also says, I don't want you to have a hard heart. A hard heart is not a godly heart. A hard heart is not good for you. And so sometimes they feel sort of the same at times. And so we need to learn how to discern the difference. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what a guarded heart is. Susan's going to talk a little bit about a hard heart. And we're going to talk about how to tell the difference. And what do you do when you're accused of one, but it's really the other? But before we do, I would love to hear from you. What do you think? Let's define guard your heart. What does that mean to you? What do you think that means biblically, to guard your heart? If God says that this is one of the most important acts of self-stewardship you could do, how many of you guard your bank account?
I sure do.
We have like double passwords on the bank account, right? We've got a password to get in, we've got a user ID to get in, then we've got a code to put in. I mean, there's lots of walls. Why do you guard your bank account? Because it's important, and you don't want everybody to have access to your bank account, because then it might harm you. You might have not enough money to pay your bills or your kids' tuition or your medical bills, all the things that you need for life. So what does guarding your heart mean? Samantha says to protect it. What does that look like, though? What does it mean to protect your heart? Against what? For what? Just like we're protecting our bank account, not just so that we can save $1 million. What are we protecting our bank account for? So what are we protecting our heart for? Right, Jessica said something really interesting. I think this is really important. Guard the desires and the direction of your heart. You're right. You're so right, Jessica. The Bible tells us that lesser loves can wreck our lives. We're to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And if we don't guard that first love, guess what we as women tend to love? We tend to love attention. We tend to love affection. We tend to love connection, which are not sins. We tend to love approval. It's not sinful to love those things. We love our children. It's not sinful to love that. We love our man. We love our marriage. Some of us get caught up in loving money. We can have a lot of false loves if we don't guard our heart, or good loves that take the place of God. Right? And so many of you here are struggling with that. You've become a man-centered or a marriage-centered woman, not a God-centered woman. And God may be using this season in your life and in your marriage to reorient your loves. Guard your heart above all else. Amanda says, is guarding my heart the same as setting boundaries? It can be. You have some boundaries around your bank account. I have some boundaries around my heart. What might be some boundaries? What might be some good, healthy boundaries that you have for yourself to protect yourself and your heart, what would be some good boundaries? I'll tell you one for me. I don't listen to trash music,
Hmm.
right? I don't listen to it. I just don't. It irritates me. It aggravates me. It causes me to have bad thoughts. I don't watch trash movies, right? That's one way I guard what comes into me. Just like some people don't eat junk food. I do eat a little junk food, so I can't say that, but I don't eat junk stuff in terms of the kinds of thinking that goes into my head. I want to be a wise woman. And so I will be discerning on what I take into myself and what I don't take into myself. That's guarding my heart. I'm protecting my mind, right? I'm protecting whatsoever things are true and good and right. And what am I going to let myself meditate on? I don't do that. That's one way I guide my heart. How do you guide? What are boundaries you put around your heart?
Yeah, definitely. And I love that point of these are boundaries you have with yourself, what you will and won't let yourself do. I think that's as important as the relationships we have, what we allow in our relationships, who we hang out with, what we allow in terms of how people talk to us, or what situations we allow ourselves to be in. It's how we talk to ourselves, our own self-talk. I won't allow myself to spiral in shame and shaming statements. That's just something that I find is not good for my heart. It doesn't take me to a great place. That's a boundary I have with myself.
Mm-hmm. Got a couple good comments on Instagram. Teresa says, guard what God has entrusted to us. That's what I'm guarding. Or Grace said, I used to think protecting my heart meant to not let other people in. But now that's more of a hard heart, right? But now I've learned that protecting my heart is keeping my priorities right with Jesus first, not my husband, not my family. My number one boundary for guarding my heart is I get to tell my own story. No one gets to tell me what happened to me or deny me the ability to feel and experience and process my story. So there's a really operative word there, mine, mine. This is mine. This is yours, right? I'm going to protect mine. That's why we protect my bank account. I don't protect Susan's bank account. I don't have access to Susan's bank account. Not that she doesn't like me. She works with me, but
I even trust you.
Her bank account. She doesn't have access to mine, right? There's certain things but my husband has access to my bank account, right? And some of your husbands probably shouldn't have access to your bank account if you can help it. So these are the things that you have to begin to discern with boundaries.
Yeah. And that verse is a directive that's personal towards us. It doesn't say make sure that other people guard your heart. It's speaking to us. We are responsible for guarding our heart. And that's a big job.
It is a big job. Jessica says access. I don't have I don't allow access to my heart with people that are hurtful or harmful. And this is a whole other topic. And we're going to be having a workshop next week, which many of you have already signed up for because you've been here before. But the workshop is I'm not okay when you're not okay. And when you are in that spot, you have not guarded your heart, right? You have not guarded your heart because you are impacted and affected by other people in a really negative way. And we might be. If you have COVID, I might catch COVID. And maybe it's because I didn't protect myself. I didn't wear a mask. I didn't wear gloves. I didn't stay away from you, right? And so people impact us. They do. But we're to be stewards, if at all possible. Now, sometimes where it's not possible, someone just clobbers you over the head or someone robs you or someone rapes you and you didn't know it was coming. But when it's in relationship form of people that you know, and you know they're not safe people, you know they've harmed you in the past, and yet you still give access to your body, to your bank account, to your mind. They get to tell you what to think. They get to tell you what to believe. They get to tell you what to do. They get to tell you what not to do. You're not being a good steward of you. And so you're not okay. And so what we try to do is get them to stop doing that. But that's not what Jesus tells you. Not to stop getting them to stop doing it. It's guard your heart. So this workshop is going to be all about how do you learn to be okay when someone else won't change. And so if you want some information, I'm going to put a little banner about that, how to sign up. This is I'm not okay when you're not okay, defining my problem, your problem, and our problem together. And if you want to do that, just go to leslievernick.com/join webinar. It's going to be an hour long next Thursday, noon Eastern time, 7:30 Eastern time. I will be live each time. And we will have one of our coaches with me afterwards to answer your questions. And we take it off of Facebook. We take it off of Instagram because we want you to have total privacy and total freedom to ask your questions without worrying about it being on social media. So you have to sign up and register because you will get a link to a site off of social media to attend the workshop. And we hope you attend live because the live part will give you something that you will not get with the recording. There will be a recording if you can't attend. But let me say this. The connection and the community and knowing you are not alone. You're not the only one who hasn't guarded your heart. You're not the only one who's in a destructive marriage. You're not the only one who's been fooled. You're not the only one who's struggling with bitterness and anger and resentment. You're not the only one who's struggling with trusting God in the midst of your pain. You're not the only one, but sometimes it feels like it. And so when you come to a workshop like this and you're free to comment and interact with the women on the chat and you're free to ask questions in the Q&A time afterwards, that part will not be recorded because we want you to be safe as possible. So we will not record that. We will not send that out with the recording. The only thing you'll get with the recording is the actual workshop itself, which will be amazing, but it's not going to give you the community and connection that is so important. And that's why you're here on Facebook and that's why you're on Instagram, right? You love the community and connection, but even this way, you can't really talk to each other in a chat feature like we do in chat. All right. And so we have a whole chat feature that you can talk to each other. My coaches will be on there as well that you can ask questions during the workshop if you don't understand something. We really want you to get this, that when you're not okay because someone else won't change, what we tend to do instead of taking care of our own boundaries so that we can learn to be okay, we try to fix them because obviously if they get fixed, if they stop watching porn, if they start being faithful, if they stop lying, if they stop losing their cool all the time, we'd be fine, right? But then what we're saying is my heart is dependent on them and it's not dependent on the Lord. And what if they never change? That's when we slide into a hard heart. Susan, talk a little bit about a hard heart.
Yeah, so that's a great lead in, is sometimes that suffering can cause us to become prideful or self-righteous, that we know the answers, we know the solutions, and sometimes actually we do know how to fix the problem if only somebody else would do something different, but we get hyper-focused on that. And we sometimes take that on as our highest priority rather than God. And so we become closed off, maybe stubborn. We forget God's provisions of how he can help us through difficulties and how we can suffer well. Sometimes we have a lack of trust in God because we're looking for ourselves to solve the problem. Right. And I know this all well is sometimes God doesn't fix somebody else. He doesn't change somebody else, but we are told if we pray hard enough, if we do the right things, say the right things, and just wait and pray that it will happen. But God doesn't swoop in and cause someone to change that doesn't want to change. And sometimes we can get impatient and think, oh God, I've got this. I can make him change. I can do it. And I think that actually causes a hard heart, is that we forget that God's timing is not our timing and that he is ultimately in control and he will provide even in the midst of suffering.
Yeah. And so in the suffering, Satan is speaking to us, because we've been harmed. We've been harmed by this person that we love. And, it hurts. And so when we're in this painful place, it's very tempting not to guard our heart against the whispers. Hate, 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 hate. I was walking and I have a playlist and one of the songs that came up, and I don't know how it got on my playlist, but I have to hate him in order to love me. And I'm like, wow, that's the message of the world. Like we have to hate our enemies, right? Politically, Relationally, if they hurt me, I'm going to hurt them. That's the message in our world today. If you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. If you harm me, I'm going to hate you for the rest of my life. I have to hate you in order to get strong. That's the message. But that's the message of the world. That is not Jesus's message. Jesus says, love your enemies. He's not saying sleep with them. He's not saying live with them. He's not saying stay married to them. What he's saying is, don't let them rob you of who you are. You are a lover. You are an image bearer of God, and you were created to love. That doesn't mean sacrifice yourself to enable someone else to sin against you. Love is seeking another person's good. And so sometimes their highest good is to let them go and let them live in the mud for, like the prodigal son did for a while. Maybe then they'll come to their senses. But for you to continue to coddle, enable, beg, plead, threaten is only going to continue to put you in a place of great temptation to have a hard and bitter heart, because sin doesn't just impact us. Someone else's sin doesn't just affect us. It infects us with poison. And if we don't know how to guard our heart against that, we will get a hard heart. Prideful, stubborn, rebellious, unforgiving, resentful, bitter. Is that who you want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes that anger is a natural emotion that comes when somebody has harmed us and sinned against us.
And
but
the right
sometimes,
emotion.
but sometimes we can hang so tightly onto anger and that it begins to infect us, and it becomes rooted in bitterness in our hearts. And then our hearts can become hardened. Instead of us asking ourselves, why are we angry? What do I need to do in order to guard my heart so I don't have to continue being angry? And so that action is not, how do I change him? It's, how do I change me or my circumstances, my situation, so that I don't have to live in I can't say that word right now, Leslie. Perpetual anger.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing, or you know the word, but you can't say it.
Yes.
Must be age.
Maybe. We both have birthdays coming up this month, don't we, Leslie?
I know. We do have birthdays coming up. Yeah. So what is your problem with guarding your heart well? What is your biggest obstacle, biggest challenge to guarding your heart well? We want to leave you with some takeaways. We want to help you learn how to do this and how to recognize that your heart isn't guarded. Your heart is bitter. Your heart is hard. Sometimes we're so focused on their problem. Like, he's watching porn. He's watching porn. You have every right to feel hurt and angry and upset. And what are you going to do with your problem? Because these are all your emotions that you're being infected with. And yet you don't do nothing with that. You're so busy trying to fix him so you don't feel those feelings. And how's that working? It's not working. And so the whole workshop is going to be talking about that. And how do you switch gears? But for a moment, Susan, I would love, you said in the beginning, you got accused of having a hard heart.
Yes.
When you really had a guarded heart. And oftentimes your Christian counselor in a marriage counseling situation, when you're not willing to trust again, you're not willing to believe him because he's been a chronic liar. Why should you believe him? Right? The Bible says that if to put trust in an unfaithful or unreliable person is stupid. It's stupid. And so why would you do that? If you're going to guard your heart, why would you trust someone who's not trustworthy? And yet the Christian line is, well, you have to forgive. Well, you might forgive, but you're not going to trust him. And then you get accused of a hard heart. And so what do you do in that situation? Susan, I don't know how much of your story you want to tell, but I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Yeah.
It does feel a little bit vulnerable, but without giving too much detail, I invited a pastor over. So my ex-husband was involved in some behaviors that caused some consequences. And then so the typical was that he would get really anxious that consequences were coming. And then he would need me to come in and soothe him or protect him or, try to not get him to have these consequences. And I just said, I can't keep doing this. It's been 20 years of this. I'm not doing it. But I called a pastor in and said, he needs care. He needs support. He needs prayer. And I can't do it. So the pastor came over, but the pastor ended up praying for my hard heart. He prayed for my hard heart. And I got to be honest with you, I felt a little offended because I had been working on my boundaries. I had been working on my own health. I had been working on detaching, staying well as much as I could. And I had also been preparing to leave. And the church, this pastor who was over, was saying, you can't. God hates divorce. You can't be preparing to leave. You've got to pray more and you've got to love better so that he can change. And so I felt like it was just crazy making, that I was caught in this belief of I can't leave. And also I've got a hard heart. And it was really tricky to navigate that, and really going to God and examining my own heart of, God, am I hardened in some way that I don't recognize? Or am I just having boundaries? And the church didn't want me to have boundaries because that might mean that I would leave. And then they'd be left with, what do they do with this person? Who's going to take care of him? Who's going to keep showing up for him?
Mm-hmm. And this is really such a common problem for so many of you, that you're the people that you trust to advise you spiritually, the people that you go to, are giving you bad advice. That they're blaming you. They're making you responsible for his well-being. Like, hey, if you don't take him back, he might do some damage to himself. He might.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at Judas. And Judas went and killed himself, and Jesus didn't stop him. All right. And so these are places where the truth of Scripture is hard. It's not harsh, but it's hard to take in, that God gives each person their no. And when Susan's husband says, no, I don't want to live in a relationship of trust and safety. I want to do what I want to do, whatever it was. And then I want you to come and comfort me. And this is often, we saw this in our Conquer group the other day, that a man was very repentant. It looked like, I'm so sorry. I'm a bum. I'm a horrible person. Lots of self-shaming statements about what he did. Mm-hmm. But what he wanted from that was, so comfort me, make me feel better. Yes. Right? And if she won't do that, she's got a hard heart. But to do that takes away the information the pain is giving you. It's sort of like asking the doctor when you have a broken leg, hey, don't set my leg, just give me narcotics. Like, that's not love. That's not helping a person. And so when we just comfort someone in their pain, and it's a pattern over and over again that they get themselves in pain, and then they expect you to fix it and make them feel better, and we think that's godly, that's called codependency. Mm-hmm. And we are going to talk about that in the workshop. It is not helpful for you to rescue them. It might be helpful if you didn't have a hard heart to say them in love, all in love. Hey, I am sad for you, and I will pray for you. That's loving your enemy. And if there's any way, in a good way, that I can help, I will. But you have done this to yourself. And if this isn't who you want to be anymore, it's not about comfort. It's about change. Mm-hmm. And you're the one who has to make that change. I can't. I have stood on my head for hours praying and fasting, and you haven't changed. So it is up to you to make that decision to change. And you are free to be the man you want to be. And I am free to decide I can't live with that man anymore. Those are hard words, but they're loving words from a guarded heart, not a hard heart. Mm-hmm. And you'll learn some of those words in the workshop. You really want to attend.
It's so helpful to have your scripts, Leslie, and I'm so glad you're doing this workshop, because it will be packed with information and scripts like that. And I find that so helpful for clarity, because it gets really confusing when you do hear those shaming statements that sound like an apology. I'm so horrible. I can't believe that I did this kind of stuff. It sounds like they might be repentant, but when behavior doesn't change after that, when it becomes, you need to rescue me from my feelings, really nothing is going to be different going forward.
Pain is a wonderful teacher, right? And so your pain is a wonderful teacher. Pay attention. You haven't guarded your heart well. It doesn't mean if you guard your heart, you're never going to feel pain, for sure. It doesn't mean that at all. But pain tells you, wake up, pay attention. Something's wrong. The problem is that when we're in pain, we're not okay. This is the workshop that we're going to do. We're not okay. We say, okay, well, you're the cause of my pain. So you need to change so that I don't feel my pain. And there's nothing wrong with that. If my husband steps on my toe and I have pain, I'm going to push him off or say, hey, you stepped on my toe. And he's going to go, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. But if he steps on my toe again and again on purpose, and my toe is sore and he doesn't stop stepping on my toe, and this is a pattern, I'm not going to get too close to him when we walk. And I'm going to guard my feet, and I'm going to have boundaries around how close he gets to me so he doesn't stomp on my toe again. Do you hear what I'm saying? Is that it's okay to say to someone, ouch, that's hurt. And a normal person that you're in a relationship would say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I won't do that again. But someone who does it repeatedly after you've said, ouch, stop, don't, I don't like that. That's guarding your heart. Hey, let's protect our relationship. Our relationship's getting shaky here. This is hurting it. And you're speaking up and they don't care or they don't change. That's information for you. That's information for you. Susan, we're going to go to some questions. I think we have some here.
We do.
How do I guard my heart effectively if I'm in a marriage with a recovering porn addict? My husband is working on himself, but because there's no trust, I can feel my heart becoming hard. How do I stay open to healing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm curious, you feel your heart becoming hard. I would get specific with that. With the Lord, what does that mean? What are you noticing about yourself? What's taking over? What's taking the focus off of God? Because that's really, when you know the answer to that, you know better how to help yourself. But I think recognizing that you want to be open to your own healing. So there's your own healing to do here as well. And that is, I think, recognizing you have a reason you don't trust and being a little more detached, really clarifying your own boundaries of how close can you be to him while he's still recovering. He hasn't rebuilt trust yet. He may be working on it, but until you see a new pattern, what boundaries do you need to have in place for yourself? What does guarding yourself look like in this period before a new pattern takes shape?
And I think sometimes we think because we don't trust someone, we have a hard heart. And I think this is doing your own work of even trusting. So sometimes people break your trust in a way that probably it won't ever be rebuilt in a good way, right? So if someone molested my child, I'd probably work through forgiveness. I don't think I'd ever trust him again with my child, right? So sometimes consequences like broken trust, just like if you hit someone with a car and you didn't even mean it, you were just being stupid, you were texting and you ran over a kid on a bike and the kid dies. You could be really sorry. You could never text again. You could change. And that kid doesn't come back to life. And I think we've put an inordinate burden on ourselves that every relationship is fixable and repairable. And sometimes it isn't. And I think it's okay to call it. And that's where you do your own work. Will I ever be able to trust him again? Because if he does truly change, and if he does truly do his work, he deserves a second chance, right? He deserves a second chance at a good marriage. And it would be a compassionate thing to cry uncle and say, I don't think I can ever trust you again. The history is too long. It's been too much, or I just have had so much broken trust in my life. I don't think I will be able to fully trust you again. And are you okay with that? I think this is the work of being honest in relationship about what you can do and what you can't do, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, instead of putting all this should on your back. Like, I should do this and I should do that and I have to do this and I have to do that. God's going to be mad at me. God knows what you've been through. And so I think to stop thinking about repairing the marriage right now and just let him do his work and you do your work might be a good first step. Because I think you're getting anxious that I'm going to have to do something I don't want to do. And so you're tightening up, and that may feel like a hard heart when it may be just. So Susan's advice to really check in with your body and the Lord. What is this about?
Yeah, there's going to be a period while you're rebuilding trust of gaining safety again in the relationship before connection can be rebuilt. And those are pretty important when we're talking about trust, safety and connection. And connection has been broken and safety has been broken. And so reestablishing what that could look like. And there's some negotiation that happens there, right? This is what it looks like when I don't trust you. Can you deal with that?
And I think a really important question, write these down. So if I were doing marriage counseling and in your situation right now, and you're not ready for marriage counseling. So if you were ready for marriage counseling and you both wanted to say, hey, can this marriage be fixed? I would ask you to fill out this kind of questionnaire. If you had a great marriage full of trust and safety, where it says in Proverbs 31, he trusts her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life. So if you had that kind of marriage that the Bible describes as a really good marriage, I want you to write out what that would look like, sound like, and feel like. So I would ask each of you to do that privately. And then I would look at it privately and see what kind of marriage each of you want, because it might be very different. So for him, it might look like you do everything he wants you to do. You never argue with him. You submit to him all the time. It might look very distorted. And that's not the kind of marriage you want at all. So define, what does it look like to have a good marriage? Write it down, each of you. And then the second, what will it take to rebuild broken trust? And have him do the work of writing it down. And you do the work of writing it down. Because oftentimes people can say lots of stuff, but oftentimes they won't even take the time to think through that question in an adequate way, right? And so if they won't take the time, if I'm the counselor, but you could ask them this question. Hey, if you want to restore our marriage, what would having a great marriage look like to you? Write it down for me. If you want to be a trustworthy man, what does a trustworthy man do, say, feel, and act like, especially when he's tempted? Write that down. What would it take to rebuild my trust from what our history is? Write that down. If he isn't willing to do that little bit of work, he is nowhere near ready to do the work of doing the work. So here's a place where you can test him. Remember in the Old Testament, Joseph tested his brothers. They said, oh, we're different, we're different, we're different. So he tested them, right? He put the different tests in there to see, can I trust you now? Will you throw Benjamin under the bus like you did me? Can I really trust you again? And after they passed the test, he then was willing to reconcile. So those would be some things I would do if I were a wife in that situation, or I was the counselor working with you, is give him some homework to do to make him self-reflect and to see if he can self-reflect, because oftentimes unhealthy people will not, cannot self-reflect, and see what are the desires of his heart for a good marriage. And what does he see? He has to do to rebuild broken trust. And if he can't and not willing even to figure that out, then he's not willing to work. It's sort of like saying, I want to go on vacation to California, but I don't want to look at a map. I don't want to call an airline. I don't want to call a travel agency. I don't want to do any work. Just do it for me. Don't do it. That's not your work to do. It's his work. Somebody said, how do we sign up for the workshop? So those of you who are listening and not watching, go to leslievernick.com/join webinar, all one word. And you'll get a link to sign up for the webinar either at noon Eastern time next Thursday on the 15th or at 7:30 p.m. There's a question on Instagram I want to take, because usually our person's tracking Facebook. Do you believe the church should support divorced women who left due to abuse? You want to share your view on that, Susan?
I'm looking for the question that you just read again.
It's on Instagram. It's not on that track.
Can you read that again?
Do you believe the church should support divorced women who left due to abuse?
Well, yes. Um, yeah, that's a loaded question because there's a lot in that. I think getting the church, first of all, to even look at abuse and look at the effects of abuse is going to be difficult enough. Getting them to take their focus off of marriage and on individuals. I don't even know that we're there yet with a lot of these churches. So I do think that there's a lot of reason for divorce, and God talks about reasons why we should divorce or can divorce. And so if God is allowing that, why would a church not support that? If God's supporting it. Yeah, what are your thoughts, Leslie?
I think that's right. I think that the church should help oppressed people of any place.
Yeah, yes.
So the church should have helped slaves, right? They should have helped slaves, not endorse slavery. They should have helped, they should help widows and orphans in their distress, divorced women and children in their distress. I think that's what the church is called to do. And when someone is being abused, mistreated, I think that is the place for the church to come in and support those people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to some other questions. All right, great. Thanks for letting me know, Karen. Let's see. Can others be too manipulative if they know they mean more to you than you will ever mean to them?
Certainly, if they feel like they have power over you. But I think in that question, why are they meaning more to you? Are they meaning more to you than God? Are you willing to sacrifice your own well-being, your own sense of self in order to support them? If those things are true, they will continue to have power and control over you. Because if they threaten that, you're going to always acquiesce if that's your high value, is to be in relationship to a certain person.
Yeah, and let's just think about it as children. Probably our children mean more to us than we mean to them, in childhood. And they do try to be manipulative, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mom, you're ruining my life. You hate me. I hate you. Kids say all kinds of things that try to manipulate you into doing what they want. And most healthy moms love their children dearly, probably more than their children love them back at that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have boundaries and don't get manipulated because they know it's not good for them to get manipulated, and it's not good for their child to manipulate. So loving their child means not allowing them to get away with manipulation, right? Because it's not a healthy relationship skill for adulthood at all, but children will try it. And so I think the question is, yeah, the others can be manipulative. Others will be manipulative. And if you allow that to happen, then that's on you. And I think that's where you have to own, why aren't I able to say no? Why am I so easily manipulated? Does love mean I always say yes? Does love mean I always give in? Does love mean I don't have any boundaries? That's your work to do. And we'll talk about that in the workshop, because I think sometimes we want to blame them for being manipulative when people are going to be people. It's up to us to recognize, oh, I'm being manipulated and I'm not going to let that happen. Whether it's a little kid who does it or a big person who does it.
Yeah.
And you can still love them far more than they love you.
Yes. But the why behind that's important. Is it a fear of losing them that allows you to be manipulated?
Right.
Is that what you mean by loving them more than they love you? Is you can't bear the thought of losing them or them not being okay?
Right.
Is that you're willing to, willing to not have a no, or to continually be manipulated so that they can be okay and be in your life?
All right. Here's another question. When friends forgive you, but don't wish to reconcile, even though you are truly repentant and willing to do what it takes to make the friendship right, is it hardening my heart by changing my phone number?
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about this question. Do you have thoughts right away, Leslie?
I would say to yourself, if they've already told you that they don't want to restore a relationship with you for whatever reason, why wouldn't you just believe it that they're not going to call you? Why are you feeling like you need to change your number? That's the question you need to ask yourself. Is it a retaliatory act? Like, okay, if you don't like me, I'm not going to, I'm not going to give any access. I mean, so changing your number is if someone wants to be friends with you that you don't want to be friends with, right? But if they've already said to you, hey, the friendship is over, we're not interested in reconciling, why would you change your number? It doesn't sound like they're going to be calling you. Now, if they were harassing you, yes, I would change my number, but I'm not sure what that strategy is serving. And I think that might be helpful for you to look at. Like, what is that a statement about?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's a statement about anger, then yes, you might be hardening your heart. Retaliation, like Leslie said.
Yeah. So hope that's helpful. How do you guard your heart and relate to an abusive mom? Since as long as I remember, she's a blamer, biological mother with abusive behavior since my childhood. She had a suicide attempt about 21 years ago, persistent toxic conduct, equivalent to a acidic volcano, who does not accept her responsibility. Sounds like my mom. Although through the years, recently, while she was visiting my house during a medical treatment, she has acted again in the only way she knows. Abusive, aggressive, expressing several times, screaming her dissatisfaction about me. Additionally, unshamedly, she says that she had planned the suicide attempt against someone else, my son's dad. However, she waited until he was not there to make a disaster, while the only people in the house were my baby son and me. So, okay, so the question really is, this woman is a little crazy or a lot crazy. She does destructive and mean things. How do I guard my heart and honor my mother when she is acting dishonorably and scary? And she's my mother.
Yeah, you learned that very well. You walked that out beautifully.
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
You have to have boundaries. All right. So if she's not going to, I'm not sure why she would be in your home if she treats you in a frightening, threatening way, right? Especially when you have a little to protect. So it might be that, hey, mom, if you need, money for an Uber ride to the doctor, I'll order an Uber for you, but I'm not driving you in the car because of the way you treat me. I wish that were different. But my boundary is I'm not going to be in your presence when you treat me that way. I'm happy to call an Uber for you. I'm happy to pay your electric bill. So what is it that you can do to serve and honor a mom who is broken? How can you show compassion by not having a hard heart? I'm not willing to have anything to do with you. How might I serve you in the ways that are safe for me to do? Right? And how might I not get manipulated by you into me doing something for you that's causing me or littles around me danger and harm? Right? And I think it's that balance. So she's not going to be happy either way. You went out of your way to have her in your home and to take care of her. She wasn't happy there. So you doing it to try to get her approval, try to get her to stop, try to get her to love you, get that right off the table. All right. She's never going to give you what you want. The question you have to answer yourself is, what kind of person do I want to be in this situation? And that's what I had to wrestle with. My mom was never going to, at least I didn't think at the time, she was never going to apologize. She was never going to love me. She was never going to stop. All those kind of things. At the end, she kind of did, partly because she was dying of cancer and she doesn't have the energy to do what she used to do. But she also began to really change. She began to have a change of heart. But I had really firm boundaries. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. And if I feel scared or if I get, in a place, I'm going to have to leave so I can take care of me. And if that means you're alone, that's your problem. We'll have to hire someone to take care of you. I'm not going to be here. So I think those are the things that you have to really decide. What kind of person do I want to be in this situation before the Lord? So that I feel I held my end of the part. I loved my enemy well. I didn't give my enemy access to harm me. That's not love. It's not love for you and it's not love for them. You're to love yourself and you're to love them. It's not loving to let someone harm you, to them or to you. Any other thoughts, Susan?
Well, I just want to clarify, who do I want to be given who that person is? Because I think we all have in our minds how we want to show up, right? As a daughter, you might be thinking, oh, I want to be able to have nice, loving Christmases. I want to be able to sit with my mom in front of the fire and open gifts, and we both, cheer and clap. But given who she is, that's not a possibility. And so given who she is, who can you still be? Right? So getting that dream out of your head, there's a lot of grief that comes with that. The deep desires that you wish were true, but aren't true. So being rooted in the truth of who she is may change that a little bit. Who can you still be and keep your heart guarded is really important. Like Leslie's saying, and everybody's boundaries are different. And so really defining what can you do and still protect yourself is completely up to you. Nobody else can decide that, only you. But then you have to hold yourself to that so that you're guarding your house.
I love that you're saying that, Susan, because I think our boundaries are different and our capacity is different. All right. So perhaps my capacity to get by on 4 hours sleep was way different than it is now. Like I can't get by on 4 hours sleep. I just can't do it. When I traveled back from Chicago and I had to get up really early to catch a plane, like I was a total wreck the next day, physically. And even emotionally, I couldn't think, I couldn't cope. So everybody has their own capacity to deal with certain things. Just like some people can hold their urine a really long time and some people cannot. It doesn't make them a bad person, but you better have some awareness of your capacity so you don't keep peeing on yourself, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way, we have emotional capacity, we have physical capacity, we have spiritual capacity. When we're out of gas because someone has used up all of our capacity and we've let that happen, then we put ourselves in a place where we're not going to cope well. And so this is where Susan is so wise when she says, don't compare yourself to other people. Well, she did it really well, or she could do it. She could bring her crazy mom in and live with her and it didn't seem to bother her. What's wrong with me? We do that a lot as Christians. We say, wow, I wish I could do what she did. She's the godly one. I'm the worm. No, each of us have our own history and we have our own capacity. And so honor, God has said he has put fences around us. Some people have a great big yard of capacity and other people have a very tiny, small little lot of capacity. And that is God's way he's designed you. So honor that as you figure out how you're going to show up. Mm-hmm. All right. So someone wants to know how to stay well in a marriage and keep your heart in the right place to love your spouse, but they're not willing to make any changes or go deeper in the marriage. Any thoughts, Susan?
Well, I think it is to recognize the truth of that. If they're not willing to go deeper, you have to settle your expectations on the fact that you won't have a deep relationship. It may only be surface level. And to make sure that when you're guarding your heart or giving your heart what it needs, is that you're providing that in other areas for yourself. If you're a person who needs deep connection and you know your husband's not capable or willing, then making sure that you have that outside, great relationships at church, girlfriends, family members, so that you get what you need, so that you're not perpetually angry that he's not giving you what you need, and you're not starving yourself of what you need because he can't provide it.
Yeah. I love that answer. And I don't have much to add other than staying well doesn't mean you're working on your marriage. Staying well means you accept what he's capable of and his capacity and his willingness to do. So he might be a good provider. He might be a good father. He might be a great handyman, and he might not have anything to do emotionally with you and be able to hold a deep conversation. And if you push it, he might get mean. I don't know if you can't stay well, if you're in danger, you cannot stay well if you're not safe. But if there's good parts of a person and they have a lack of capacity in certain areas, you may have to decide, or you can decide to say, hey, I accept that in that department, they're not very good. And so just like if they're not a good handyman, they're not good at maintaining the house. Well, instead of resenting that and getting a hard heart, well, my dad was a handyman. Why can't he learn this? He doesn't want to learn this. It's not his thing. He doesn't want to go there. Can you accept it and stay well and get someone else to do some of the work, right? In the same way, I need a girlfriend to be deep with. I need other companions to talk about spiritual depth things that he just won't talk about, right? And I think that's a lot of marriages, actually, how they roll. Nobody gets all 52 cards in the deck. Now it's important to know which cards are missing. So the deep card might be missing, but the honesty card is there, right? When the honesty, faithful, trustworthy cards are missing, then it's really hard to maintain any kind of safety.
Yeah.
This topic is very confusing for me. I've been in a 20-year marriage where my husband has been verbally, emotionally abusive at times. 10 years ago, I stepped out of the marriage and I had an affair. I know I hurt my husband deeply. I've asked for his forgiveness many times, repented. I'm trying to rebuild our marriage. My husband is still so angry and he continues to be abusive at times. I feel that now he's a trump card he can play against me and uses it to justify his behavior. He says he can't forgive and stay married to me. Anytime infidelity is discussed, it's so confusing because usually the women in this community are victims. But in this case, the person doing the wrong was me. I know the adultery is fully my responsibility and I own it. But the presence of abuse complicates things for me to know what is my fault and what is not.
Yeah, that's a really hard situation when you're working hard to rebuild trust, but the other person is actually getting a hard heart. So his anger might take center stage here, that his unforgiveness is turning to bitterness against you, which is then coming out in forms of abuse, which are in no way your fault. So I hope that's clear for you. You said it's getting confusing or complicated. Abuse is never okay, even if you were at fault. And so he's got some work to do. You've got work of rebuilding trust. But if he's not willing to do the work of forgiveness and allowing you to rebuild the trust with him, this is not going to get better. And there's not much that you can do to make him do his work.
Right. Remember I said earlier that sometimes people can't trust again. Right. And so it's not fair for you to stay in a relationship where someone wants to punish you for the rest of your marriage for what you did wrong. You did wrong. Yes, you've owned that. You've repented. And this is Susan's so right. He's developed the hard heart now, and he feels entitled to make you pay over and over and over again for what you did. And I think this is where it's a kindness to say, I accept that you will never forgive me and you will never be able to trust me again. So where do we go from here? Right? Because that could be like a splash of cold water in his face, like, whoa, like, no, I didn't. And because you can't seem to get over this. And so if you can't get over it, you don't want to get over it, you want me to pay for the rest of my life, we can't stay married in a good way. It's not possible. Right. Yeah. And so I think this is where you come to Jesus moment and have an honest, loving conversation, which I don't want to force you to stay married to me. If you can't trust me, if you can't ever get over this, if you can't forgive and let go and move on and rebuild trust, I accept that. I accept that. That's one of the consequences of my sin is our marriage died. Right. But what I'm not willing to do, and this is your guarded heart, I'm not willing to be the punching bag for your anger anymore. And I think that is a come to Jesus moment for him to decide which way he wants to go. But unless you bring it out in the open and put it on the table, the same pattern is going to continue. And you don't deserve. Jesus forgave your sin. And so this is the hard heart. We want to punish the person over and over again for hurting us. But that's not our place. God's just, his justice is there, and Jesus forgave your sin. And you don't need to allow yourself to continue to be beat up by him. I think you can acknowledge he doesn't have the capacity right now to forgive. All right, we're almost at the hour. So we always do this takeaway. What was your takeaway? What's your action step from here? What's your lesson from a hard heart to a guarded heart, from a guarded heart to a hard heart? Where are you? And what has the Holy Spirit spoken to you today about where you are and what lesson might you need to take? What step might you need to take? What shift might you need to take as a result of spending an hour of your time with Susan and I? Yeah, Missy says, I can accept my marriage as is. I get what I need elsewhere. He's a great provider. Yeah. However, if he's committing adultery, it's not your job to live a lie and cover for him. No,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great takeaways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Charlie, why do I keep trying to connect with someone who doesn't have the capacity? You're right. I recognize it is in me, but I don't know how to work on it. Show up for the workshop next week. We'll talk about how to deal with your problem. It's really easy to identify their problem. And now you're saying, oh, my problem is I don't know how to deal with his inability to connect. And so I think this is really important for you to understand, how do I work on my problem? And why do I keep looking for people to be in relationship with who don't have capacity to do that? That's a really good question for you to ask yourself.
Absolutely. So your next right step may be showing up on Thursday the 15th at noon or 7:30 Eastern to hear more on this topic. So if this resonated with you, go to lesliebernick.com/join webinar. You do have to register. It is free though, and it will be well worth your time. And I hope you make time for question and answer as well. You're able to show up live.
Yeah,
It's
so
gonna
just
be meaningful.
the workshop itself will be an hour. You will get I think it's about 4 or 5 pages of a workbook that I've given you so that you can easily take notes during the workshop and that you can keep. You'll get, so an hour, the workshop is about an hour. And then afterwards, my coach will stay with me afterwards and we will answer your questions. We usually stay about an hour, sometimes a little longer, depending on how many questions there are after the webinar. So save 2 hours of time if you really want to be fully present so that you can watch the workshop and then have time to listen to the questions. Even if you don't have one, listening to other people's questions just like this is really helpful for you. And we try to give a little bit more thorough answers to the questions because we have a little bit more time to do that. And so we really want you to get the value. If you're stuck and your life is not okay and you keep looking for someone to change in order for you to be okay, you're giving your well-being into someone else's hands. And God says not to do that. God says not to do that. Right. And so what do you do when someone won't change and they do affect you? They do impact you. They do make you not okay. How do you begin to work on your problem instead of trying to fix their problem? Talk all about that at the workshop. So we hope that you sign up. And if you have a girlfriend that you know would be a benefit from attending the workshop as well, she doesn't need to listen to the Facebook Lives to sign up for the workshop. She can sign up as a total guest of yours, but she still needs to sign up. But let her know. Invite her. Say, hey, I just listened to this Facebook Live that was helpful. You might want to sign up for this workshop, and give her the link and let her go watch the video about it. And it might be helpful for her as well. We need to band together as women to help each other get healthier and strong, don't we?
Absolutely. You can also share this Facebook Live with your Facebook friends or Instagram friends. Share it with them, and that can serve as the invitation. They can register if you think they may get something out of it. And the workbooks, I see a question. The workbook will come, I believe, in the email. Is that correct? And it will be on the webinar. You'll have a link in the webinar to print it off. And Leslie, usually, and I'm guessing you're going to do this time, you're going to give the gift of a filled out worksheet if they stay to the end. Is that right?
Yeah. So one of the gifts we give you if you hang out with us the whole workshop is we give you a second version of the workbook, and all the blanks are filled in so that you don't have to. I know how often I listen to webinars all the time. I'm like, what was that word? I missed that blank, so I don't want you to get into that place. So if you truly attend the workshop, really just take good notes for yourself, whatever resonates most with you, because right after the workshop, you'll get a link that gives you the whole workshop, all filled in blanks so that you have it, but you're not worrying about missing something. We really want you to get the most benefit. And so we give you a little perk for staying to the end. All right. So we're going to sign off now. It's 1 hour and we're trying to be really faithful to that. So Instagram friends, thanks so much for joining us, and Facebook and YouTube friends, we're so glad you're here as well. And we'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how blaming him keeps hurting you. How blaming him keeps hurting you. I think we're at the same time tomorrow. So we'll see you tomorrow with another coach.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Susan. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. Good to be with you, Leslie.
Bye-bye.